On the ever-changing and often turbulent stage of global economics, Germany has long been considered one of the more prosperous countries in the world. It ranks fourth when it comes to the largest economies worldwide, with the United States, given the sheer size and scope of 50 states, being considered the largest. Among the other heavy hitters are China and Japan, and much like them both, Germany has prospered greatly thanks to the number of their exports. On a smaller, more local scale, Germany is the largest economy in all of Europe, beating out others like the United Kingdom, France, and Italy with its significantly higher rate of gross domestic product. For a considerable portion of the prior century, Germany has been able to go from strength to strength in terms of growing its economy. For one, the country itself is famed the world over for its expertise in the production of automobiles, allowing them to dominate the market for luxury cars and other expensive high-end products. Industrial machinery, developed and built in Germany, is also one of the country's most highly internationally exported commodities. As a matter of fact, Germany sells so much to other countries across the world that around half of their entire economy has been built on exported goods. Of course, having a consistently strong economy isn't just an arbitrary badge of honor for a country, it also leads to significant growth and prosperity for its people. Thanks to the demand for those exported German products, jobs have long been plentiful. The government has had no shortage of coffers, the collected money and has to fund things like public services, while many other countries in the world are struggling with mounting debts and low economic growth. Other European countries have even had trouble keeping up with Germany as its economy continues to boom, with many even looking to their success as a guide or a roadmap that they could follow to solve their own economic woes. But that long period of prosperity for the German economy seems to now be under serious threat of regressing, risking taking the country from one of the best performing in the world to one of the worst economies of any developed country. How has this happened in such a short period of time? What could have not only disrupted the booming successes of the German economy, but stopped it in its tracks with enough impact to have such a widespread negative effect? Let's delve into the hows and whys of how Germany became the worst performing developed country in the world. A lot of the factors that have led to Germany's economic woes aren't unique to the country and are being experienced worldwide. Needless to say, at the time of the making of this video, the prior few years have been riddled with unexpected and catastrophic occurrences that have left their mark on the entire world. The beginning of this current decade, the 2020s, has been one of the harshest in recent memory. That's not to say things were entirely utopian and idyllic through the 2010s, but back then, we didn't have the widespread social and economic impact of a global pandemic to contend with. Across the world, the lasting effects of the COVID-19 pandemic are still very much being felt on an economic level. Given that the spread of the coronavirus caused a great number of people to stay at home and reduce the spread of infection, many businesses had no choice but to close their doors during the pandemic. These measures might have seemed drastic at the time, but they were required to keep the spread of the virus manageable and limit the loss of life COVID-19 was causing. Although money should always be of far lesser importance than human life, there's no denying that businesses closing due to the pandemic had an economic impact. The largest economies across the globe, the United States, China, and the European Union, all of whom are the main engines for the global economy, experienced weaker growth during the pandemic due to lower economic activity, and now we're seeing them continue to experience the residual effects of that. Anybody who believed the economies of the world would just resume from the point they left off before the pandemic clearly didn't have a realistic grasp of the situation and wasn't treating the pandemic with the seriousness it required. COVID-19 also hasn't vanished entirely. Thankfully, its severity has lessened, and many of the recent cases are not as dangerous as back when it first began to spread. However, with new variants still active, this is slowing down production in certain parts of the world, such as China. The head of the International Monetary Fund recently highlighted that 2023 would be tougher than the year we leave behind, with the expectation that as much as an entire third of the world's economy will go into recession. Even those few countries that aren't actively in recession will likely feel like they are as interest rates and the price of basic necessities skyrocket in the wake of the pandemic. With this expected shrink of the global and European economies, according to both the International Monetary Fund and the European Union, things aren't looking good for the foreseeable future. It's not difficult to see how, despite all their growth over the past 100 years, those factors would put Germany's economy on rocky footing, to say the least, directly following on from the COVID-19 pandemic. But the economic impact of the coronavirus has set the stage for another recent event with far-reaching international effects that's also contributed to the difficulty currently faced by Germany and its economy. On the 24th of February 2022, Russia launched an invasion into Ukraine. This was an aggressive escalation in the ongoing Russian-Ukrainian conflict that had begun way back in 2014, and it's the largest attack on a European country since the Second World War. Thanks to this conflict, many Ukrainian civilians have been caught in the crossfire and left as casualties, with estimations in the tens of thousands. Around 5 million Ukrainians have been internally displaced and forced to leave their homes, with a further 6.2 million fleeing the country as of July 2023. This has led to Europe's largest refugee crisis since the end of World War II, as well as the significant environmental damage caused by the war, widely described as ecocide by some. The impact of Russia's invasion on Ukraine has been felt the world over, particularly in Europe, where it's led to an economic and energy crisis. Much of Europe, including Germany, was dependent on cheap natural gas from Moscow to provide energy for their economies. Worldwide, the cost of energy had already sharply increased following the pandemic, with many offices forced to go cold as a cost-cutting measure. In many poorer parts of Eastern Europe, ordinary people started stocking up on firewood. A lot of the exports that bolster the German economy, things like cars and industrial equipment, are energy-intensive industries. In short, they need a lot of energy to produce these exports and meet the widespread international demand. You reduce access or increase the price of energy those industries need, and suddenly what was once Europe's manufacturing powerhouse starts to underperform. In mid-June 2022, sometime after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, one of their largest energy companies, Gazprom, shut down one of its major natural gas pipelines that provided Germany with much of its energy. According to the company themselves, Gazprom needed to conduct urgent maintenance and repair work on their Nord Stream 1 pipeline. However, it's also worth noting that the energy company is owned and run by the Russian state. Although Gazprom has maintained that these advanced technical problems caused the reduced gas flow, German officials have rejected this explanation as nothing more than a cover story, believing this move to be a deliberate political power play following the invasion of Ukraine. Germany wasn't the only European country impacted by this either. Russia, through Gazprom, cut off access to the majority of its natural gas to many countries within the European Union. Around 27 individual nations sourced 40% of their overall energy from Moscow, and the resulting cutoff led to an energy crisis across Europe. Given the higher costs and tighter supplies of energy, Europe has been attempting to change the landscape of the electricity and natural gas markets ever since to combat the rise in energy usage amid greater demand with reduced availability due to the war in Ukraine. One of the proposals to aid in the escalating energy crisis unfolding in Europe was a plan by the European Union to cap the revenue of electricity producers, essentially making it so that these large companies could only make a certain amount of profit, disincentivizing them from raising their energy prices to take advantage of the increased demand and decreased supply. Russia reduced the natural gas output to 13 European Union member nations, given their wide support for Ukraine, effectively using the war that they instigated to manipulate the wider energy market in Europe. Many governments of affected countries, like Germany, have sought out new energy suppliers and ways to conserve their limited natural gas supplies with storage facilities. However, some options for alternative suppliers involve more expensive liquefied natural gas that needs to be shipped in from overseas. This energy issue became particularly bad when we approached the winter months of 2022. While certain alternatives were able to keep large parts of Europe functioning for the most part, the subsequent energy crisis due to Russia's actions following its invasion of Ukraine has certainly had a lasting impact on Germany. The cheap natural gas previously provided by Russia in larger quantities was needed to power the factories that produce most of Germany's largest exports. Now the country's been put at risk of deindustrialization thanks to the elevated costs of energy. This has led to a number of companies with factories previously situated in Germany to move their operations elsewhere, so the ongoing high demand and low availability of energy make less of an impact on their bottom line. But this has the added effect of removing high-paying job opportunities from German citizens, thus restricting their access to income that would provide them with the ability to heat their homes and feed their families. Germany's dependence on Russian gas for energy to power its factories effectively put their entire thriving economy at the mercy of another nation. Of course, many couldn't have predicted that Russia would actually invade Ukraine in a full-scale war, but this put the German economy in a situation where its economy was at the mercy of a not-so-friendly foreign power. One major German chemical company, Evonik Industries, following these changes was intent on shifting its operations away from its main plant in the town of Essen, part of the Ruhr Valley industrial region. The Ruhr Valley, being an epicenter of German industry, meant that much of it was hit hard by the sudden lack of Russian gas to power the factories in the region. including metal plants and coal mines that were forced to shut down, as well as a massive BP oil refinery and Evonik Industries' own chemical production facility. The German government had even asked Evonik to directly keep their power plant running a few months longer, attempting to prevent the company from enacting an exodus, given not only the jobs they provided but also their contribution to the country's now struggling economy would go with them. Evonik, whose 40-story smokestack fueled the production of plastics and other goods, was intent on shifting away from their plant, instead opting to use gas-fired generators that could run on hydrogen to become more carbon neutral. The push toward renewable energy, while a hot-button issue for some, has become a sought-after solution for Germany, especially given their current predicament. Some are for this push toward renewable sources of energy, believing the political decision to rely on Russian gas is ultimately what led to higher energy costs, since now the amount of gas being received from Moscow is being restricted. After all, relying on that means that German industry and their wider economy, as well as their ordinary workers, are taking the biggest hits. Meanwhile, although the European Union has planned to cap industrial energy prices, many environmentalists have pointed out that this, while promising, will only encourage further dependence on fossil fuels. Making the switch to renewable energy sooner would be a turbulent change, but the hope is it would eventually negate the need for fossil fuels and natural gas. With the price of gas doubled between 2021 and 2023, companies need it to maintain their normal level of production. Factories need to be able to use heat to keep glass or metal at molten temperatures at all hours of the day to create the materials required for production in Germany's leading industries, especially when manufacturing car parts, leading to knock-on effects in all other major industries within Germany's economy. Yet another external economic factor that affected Germany's economy was that of China, as the country suffered its own economic slowdown due to its gradual recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. While not a part of Europe, China has the second-largest economy globally, and as a result, effects on its economy can often be felt on a much wider international scale. In the second financial quarter of 2023, as a result of a surging rate of youth unemployment and lower investments in property development, China's economy missed its previously forecasted targets for growth. Given that they were also a key trade partner for Germany, this added to the already compounding problems that affected Germany's own economy. Essentially unpredictable and in some cases even unprecedented global changes, especially the coronavirus pandemic and the Russian invasion of Ukraine, are largely to blame for Germany's current economic struggles. However, as unforeseeable as something like the pandemic was, it's the events that have occurred in the past 3 years that have exposed the foundational cracks in Germany's economic system, such as the reliance on gas from Russia to run the factories responsible for production in some of Germany's biggest exporters. As the country experienced many years of prosperity and growth, these fundamental flaws were ignored, possibly under the assumption that the growth would continue or unaware that nothing as bad as the pandemic and war in Ukraine would eventually occur. Other significant fundamental factors also contributed their fair share to the current situation Germany now finds itself in. For one, the process for approving renewable energy products, a potential alternative to the gas provided by Russia, is a lengthy and laborious one that can often discourage or disincentivize the production of more renewable energy options. Clean energy projects are often slowed down by extensive bureaucracy and heavy resistance, both from skeptics and companies that profit off the use of fossil fuels at the cost of damage to the environment. Additionally, much of the money that the German government previously had on hand during the more prosperous economic period was accumulated as the result of them delaying their investments in roads, rail networks, providing internet access to more rural areas of the country, and other public services that would have improved the quality of life for their citizens. At present, it's hard to say exactly where Germany's economy will go from here. As spending related to COVID-19 is being continuously phased out, the country could see a gradual rebound to its former growth. According to economic experts, while there is currently expected to be less demand for popular German exports that help fuel their economy, continuing net exports are expected to contribute positively to overall growth. Now watch Germany's World War III plan, or watch this video instead.